Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The round pegs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Hey friends, welcome to episode number 3 of Customer Experience Changemakers. I'm Marc Mandel. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I'm so glad that we could get together today. We're going to have a heck of an hour together today, and we're going to have an action-packed one. So I really want to get this show kicked off by just first welcoming you and making sure that you know how thrilled I am to share this hour together with my friends in the world of customer experience. Thank you for being here. You know, this show called Changemakers is a very personal show for me, and I want to talk about why I think it's personal. And then I want to relate it back to my guest as well, who's going to be joining me in just a few minutes here. I think this is a very personal show. This is a whole personal series because, I spent my career not just in these customer experience roles and customer experience companies, but I've really gravitated to companies that I think of as challenger companies, companies who are not necessarily the biggest, not necessarily the most well-known, but the company that wasn't afraid to stand for something and to believe in what it stood for and to let the world know that maybe what it thought was normal might not be so great. And so when I think of like that Apple ad that I chose to show you a moment ago, where it says, the people who are crazy enough to think they could change the world are the ones who do, I get goosebumps when I think about that because that's so aspirational for me. I get so inspired to think that people out there with just the power of one could get out there and change things and have such an impact on people. And when I talk about change, you and I both know how hard change is. And to bring change about in industries or in people's thinking or in popular culture, that's a challenging thing for a lot of us. And I built this show, Changemakers, around specifically giving a spotlight, a showcase, if you will, to people who are those people, the people in the customer experience industry who are out there paving their own way forward, who are out there saying, there could have been a way easier way, but I didn't want that way. I wanted to stand for something and believe in something and do it well and really knock it out of the park. And that's what this show is about. And that's why it's so personal to me. Well, I think, I've always been gravitated to or attracted to people at companies who think like that. And I spent my career working for those types of companies. In my career, would it have been easier to go out and get, a generic job at a large company like a Medallia or a Qualtrics or even an Ipsos or a Kantar? Sure, but I didn't. Instead, I said, let's go find the guys that are out there making the next generation ready. And I really went to those companies and I really had so much fun at those places. I couldn't resist them. And that's what this show is for. And that's what this show is about. It's about people who are out there to make change, not to go with the popular vote. It's the less popular vote, the vote that people don't necessarily know, but when they discover it, they're like, of course, that makes perfect sense. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. We got, again, an action-packed show, and we're going to get into it as we start to roll. But first, I have just a few kind of housekeeping things. And this first housekeeping thing is some way for me to show you, as my friends who are here listening into this show, my thanks. And I've done this a couple of times in the past. I love these books. I must have read, I don't know, 400 books in my life about customer experience work, either directly, like how to do good customer experience work, or by inference, where people who are just known for good customer experiences talk about what they do and why. And that latter example is a gentleman named Jesse Cole in this case. Jesse Cole's written a couple of books. And if you may not know Jesse or his name even, but if you've been following much in the kind of the sports culture world over the last couple of years, Jesse owns something called the Savannah Bananas. And if you've been following anything about the Savannah Bananas, they're on a tear. They've gone from being this little obscure, off the circuit, fake Harlem Globetrotters of baseball team to selling out 90,000 seat arenas every place they go, every city they visit. And Jesse owns the Savannah Bananas, and he talks a lot about his belief in the fan experience and what makes or breaks a great fan experience. And I wanted to encourage you, if you want copies of his books, do me a favor, just send me a message here on this in the comment screen, or if we're on LinkedIn or YouTube, and just use the comments, say, I want a copy of Jesse's books, and I'll get them in the mail to you as my gift. I think they're really pretty remarkable, and there's two different ones, and I'll send you both, again, as my gift. Well worth checkout. By the way, just as an aside, if I'm going to send you them, if you would prefer to have them as Kindle books, I could also make arrangements to get you the Amazon Kindle books of those too, if that's better or easier format for you to take a look at. You know, let's talk about what's coming next. We'll do a little bit more housekeeping here. I do a couple of different shows. This Changemakers show is one of my favorites, but another show that I also love is called CX Tales from the Trenches. And we're going to be starting season number 2 of that show in about 2 weeks. And we're going to have some new guests coming along that are some cases vendor side guys, in some cases client side guys, but I like bringing them both on at the same time and have a conversation amongst the three of us. And so more of that to come. We're going to have some guys from companies like Cotera and Opinator and They Do, and a handful of others come join me in coming weeks and months, and we'll have some announcements about that. A little bit of a personal announcement to also share. You know, not to get extreme about it, but you know, there's that saying which I remember sort of in a pejorative way from my high school days. You may have heard it too, where people said, those who can do, teach. Those who can't do, teach gym. I'm not much of a gym guy, nor a gym teacher, but I can tell you what I want to relate that to. I've spent most of my professional life helping other companies to build, to launch, to build, to run, and to grow successful, mostly software ventures. And if you don't know this about me, in the last 3 or 4 months, I've gotten a team of guys together on my own, and we're building our own software business. I call it Auction Wire. And we'll talk more about Auction Wire in coming weeks. But what it really is, it's a new way to buy sports cards and sports collectibles from auctions using AI. And I'm pretty excited about it. I'm pretty proud of Auction Wire. So more on the Auction Wire front to come. And you guys maybe even seen the news this past weekend about that big basketball card, that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant autographed card that showed up at a company called Heritage Auctions. Sold for $13 million over the weekend. It's an unheard of, unfathomable number for one basketball card in that case. So I want to talk to you about Auction Wire. It's coming, and it's something that I'm immensely proud to talk more about soon enough. Let's change gears here and talk now about what we're really here to cover. We're going to be here. I'm going to bring my guest, Adam Dorrell, on in just a moment. Adam is the founding CEO of a company called CustomerGauge. And I don't know if you know CustomerGauge at all, but if you don't, you will in this next hour. But before I bring Adam on, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And if you've not heard it, I don't know if it's going to make you laugh or it's going to make you kind of go, oh my God, but it's worth sharing here. And because it's not a great story, I'm not going to tell you the company who said it or the person at the company who shared it with me. But understand that we're here to talk today specifically about B2B, business to business customer experience work. And in the context of business to business CX work, I want to tell you a story about a gentleman. He was a very senior level leader at a B2B technology and services company, a global technology and services company. In fact, he was the chief operating officer of that company. And his name was John. And John once called me, this is years ago. He called me as an acquaintance of his. He knew what I did in the world of CX. And he said to me, hey, Mark, I need your help. He goes, my team and I, we just a couple months back paid, in that case, Bain Consulting, he said, $8 million to implement what John called my NPS program. And he goes, at my level, I just get this monthly snapshot report about how my NPS is doing. And he goes, there's months when it goes up, there's months when it goes down. And when it goes up, my boss, the CEO, calls me, he goes, John, you're a hero for getting the score up. He goes, the next month it goes down. The same boss calls me and I'm a moron. So what John was calling me to ask me for help with was, he said, I'll never forget this quote, guys. I just want your help to maximize my hero to moron ratio. I want to be a hero a little more often than I'm a moron. And it's just about really chasing that higher NPS score and keep it trending up. He says, my problem in reality is I don't know why it moves. I don't know if it moves up. Why did it move up? And what should we do more of? If it goes down, why did it go down? And what should I do less of? He goes, I don't have any idea about that. I just know it's up and down. It looks like an EKG chart, John said, like up, down, up, down, up, down. And he goes, that's really not very good. So after meeting with John, I tried to figure out how can I help not just John's company, but other B2B companies as well over these last 10 or 15 years think differently about customer feedback, customer engagement, customer insight, ultimately customer experience improvement and transformation. And spent a lot of those last 15 or so years in the B2B trenches. The problem, guys, is that the technology, the toolbox that I had around me was not designed for B2B tooling. When you think about most of the tools, whether it be where I used to work or maybe other companies in the space that you may know of, most, if not almost all of those tools were built over the years for specifically B2C engagements. You think about industries out there, it could be airlines and retail and direct-to-consumer stuff. These are platforms that are designed to satisfy those industries, those vertical markets where the numbers are huge, but the reality is they're just not B2B. And when we try to force fit a B2C process and a B2C set of toolings into a B2B environment, it does not work. Things break down. The idea of who is the customer gets completely distorted. And what I really want to start to drill in with my guest, I'm going to bring him on in just a second, Adam and I are going to start to unpack this a little bit. We're going to start to try to figure out, with your help, guys, what makes B2B CX different? What makes B2B CX maybe more sophisticated or even more complicated of a problem to go solve? And are the rewards more substantial if handled well? So let me tell you a little bit about Adam. Adam Dorrell is a guy that I've known of for many years, but really only knew in the last couple. And Adam and I really connected not too long after I went out on my own, or just as I was getting ready to go out on my own professionally, after winding down, or as I was winding down my time at my old job. And we got talking, and I had the opportunity to have linked up with Adam and his company, CustomerGauge, in an advisor and kind of a fractional helper role in what I like to do. And I can tell you that it's been eye-opening to see the immense capabilities that Adam and CustomerGauge have built. And I want to be able to bring Adam on this show to tell you guys about them, because they are so important and so differentiated, and they're not like anything I have ever seen in this voice of the customer space before. So I don't want to have any more preamble. Let's bring Adam on.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Hey, Adam. Thanks for hanging out here with my friends and me. I was just talking a moment about business to consumer CX, business to business CX, and they're apples and oranges. That the reality is that the challenges that you signed up for when you and the team put CustomerGauge together all those years ago.
Yeah.
You said, I want to go out there and solve the bigger problem. I want to go out there and solve the more interesting problem. I want to go out there and solve maybe the more impactful. I believe, and I think you would concur, that you built a business uniquely solving the problem around B2B customer feedback, analytics, and operationalization. Right? How do you get businesses to share feedback? How do you get businesses to give you meaningful information, and then the key stakeholders in those businesses and know who's who in the zoo? And then,
okay. Well, now, hold on, Mark. That's a lot to unpack. And right now, I'm still working on trying to improve my hero to moron ratio. So I'm going to try and, I love all those questions, but if it's okay with you, how about we go a bit more slowly and we try to break that down?
Yeah.
Okay?
So let's just talk about, I know CustomerGauge because I've competed against you. I've worked with you now. But it dawns on me that a lot of people listening and may not know you, may not know CustomerGauge.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear kind of the story. Can you take just a few minutes?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think one of the things we realized that, I don't know, a couple of years ago, we're probably the only CX company with customer in the name, I think.
Well, there you go.
So, we still like to keep it front and central. But it really, first of all, thanks for that wonderful intro. And it's really good to be here. I appreciate being in front of you and your audience. So let me tell you a little bit about how it started, because the dream of what we do at CustomerGauge, which is to try to, frankly, help you have a better understanding of your existing customers, didn't come specifically from B2B or B2C. I was working for a very big electronics company who just started out selling directly to consumers, and they weren't doing a great job. And in fact, but it was interesting that the fear of the company about their own CX was worse than the customers had. So we knew this when we started out doing a net promoter survey with them right at the beginning of 2004. So that, first of all, ages me, but I think was one of the first NPS practitioners out there.
You started when you were 8 years old, right?
Something like that. Yeah, I know I've got a few. No, I've been around forever, Mark. You know that. So we start, and so the confidence of the company was less than what the company, the customers were saying, but it was clear that there were some things that needed to be fixed. And one of the things that popped out then was a couple of things I found true throughout my career, is that most marketing people aren't very good at segmenting customer bases. Something to do with maybe they're not very good at doing math. I don't know. I'm a marketing guy myself.
I'm with you.
And then the other thing is that you always put the best people on acquisition, marketing or sales. And generally, the people who are on retention are the people who are not the A grade. At least that was the thinking about that.
It's the junior retention.
Exactly, right. So anyway, so a lot of lessons from this, and but I was challenged one day by the head of my division, who said, "Hey, this is great. All these customer comments coming in. So you are going back to them and answering everything." I'm like, whoa. Hold on, there's no way I can do that. I've just got 1,000 pieces of information in, and that was just from last month. How the hell am I going to do that? But that was the spark of what became CustomerGauge a few years later on my kitchen table when, we started to put this together and coding it ourselves. And when we started, we would go after any customers, B2C, B2B. We didn't really have the concept of a distinction. But we had this strong drive together, Camilla Shelton and myself, who founded the company, of you have to do follow-up. You have to close the loop with customers.
Yep.
And the culture in B2C companies about closing the loop is just not there. And there's a good reason for that. There's just not enough money usually on an individual customer to make it worth the while for any follow-ups.
It's like a return on effort problem.
Right. So guess where there is an interest in following up on customer feedback? That's in B2B. And so we made that pivot really quickly and started to build out CustomerGauge to have things like an account field that you can bring these things together. Ways of tying in your the people in the company to various levels in the organization. Are they at the C-suite? Are they middle managers, or are they operational folks? Bringing in things like account revenue, and just making it a system that was really suited for B2B and to help measure that. And I think to this day, nobody is really following us on this. I think we're out in front to do this stuff, which I'm really proud of. It also might say something that there's less of appetite in B2B for customer experience, but we know the companies, and if I can give you some experience, some examples I'd love to go into of people who are doing it really well.
There was a phrase that strikes a chord with me. You didn't use it, but I've used it in my past. I want to test it with you.
Go on.
When I think about one of the differences between B2C and B2B, people may have gravitated to B2C because they think, well, the numbers are bigger, right? No, there's more customers, potentially more feedback. But in the B2B world, the phrase I want to test with you is what we used to call LVHV feedback, which was low volume, high value.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So you're not Starbucks, you're not McDonald's, you're not cranking out 1 million surveys a week. That's just not necessarily true. But every one of those customers is important. Right. And these are larger accounts that might represent thousands or maybe millions of dollars to a company.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to treat those accounts like they're gold. You don't want to. It's not a numbers game. It's not about we win some, we lose some. Right? You want to keep the ones you got and grow. Right? But the reality is, I think when you're talking about that return on effort and treating B2B accounts like they're gold, this is just my opinion. You want to go out of your way to make sure that if they share feedback, that you do something substantial with it for everybody's benefit.
I love that, Mark. I'm really gonna run with that statement. I love that. I've never heard LVHV before, but I absolutely follow that. The low volume, high value is crucial. We've got some companies we work with. They've got maybe 60 clients.
Yep.
And half of those are multi-million dollar clients that they've got. Yep. I can think of a few, like in the auto supply chain, for example. But they've got dozens of people in those organizations who are using those products and stratifying them, for the key decision makers who only maybe even don't hear about the company from day to day, to those people who are specifying it, right down to the people on the shop floor who use that assembly product. And that's a really good audience to do. So, okay, you might have 60 clients, but you might have between 10 and 100 people in each of those organizations. So you start to build up that picture. But the correct thing to do is to assign those people to the right level in the organization and make sure you're getting the right quality of feedback from them. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, it makes me think about a situation, a current situation. I'm not going to name names for the sake of protecting people's privacy, but there's a situation right now where I'm talking with a company. They're a manufacturer of they build machines that do special handling on paper corrugation of all things. It's not a very sexy business. It's turning paper into cardboard.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality is this particular company only has under 100 customers.
Yeah.
But the reality is every machine that they place is a multi-million dollar placement, first of all. And second of all, when you think about these customers, well, maybe one entity. If you subdivide that entity, you might find out that entity has 100 plants, that each of those could be a user of another one of these huge machines.
Yeah.
And before you build out this hierarchy of an org structure, right, where you start to see the corporation is just the top of that food chain. And then you start to decompose that and start to go, well, how many stakeholders are at the corporate level? And how many stakeholders are at the subdivision level? And how many stakeholders are in the operational level? And you get this complex spider web of people.
Well, I mean, you put your finger on it. This is exactly what we designed in CustomerGauge to do this, to actually track those people and to understand how you're selling at each level. And this is how it works. If you're able to get that feedback from a company where you're polling the top of the company, but also the bottom of the company, there's a couple of things come out. Usually the CEO might buy into the strategy. This is why we built this corrugated cardboard machine, because they buy into the total cost of ownership and so on. But perhaps at the bottom level of the organization, they're like, no, we preferred the last one. We understood how it worked. And so when you get the feedback coming back like that, you can present it to the CEO and say, look, you've got a communication problem here because you're not telling the people at the bottom of the company why you bought this. And this is a strategic decision. So I love the way that our customers can uncover these fantastic bits of insight and then use them to build that relationship.
It's interesting.
But can I just go further about the corrugated cardboard?
Bring it on.
I think it's a great thing. Now, we do a lot of work in the CPG business, with companies like Coca-Cola and Heineken, who are, frankly, huge users of all sorts of carton and packaging materials. And so your example, who I don't know, by the way, but I imagine that they've got some companies like that. They're making packaging materials that are going into the supply chain, and it's going down several layers of that supply chain. It's going to a manufacturer who's packing the materials in. It's going to the, let's say Coca-Cola, which, by the way, seems like a consumer company. It's not. It's one of the world's biggest B2B companies with millions of B2B outlets that resell. And then there's the distributor, then there's the retailer or the bar, finally the consumer. And what I'm really interested in at the moment is trying to track that entire supply chain of customer experience. So to try to understand if there's too much glue on the packaging material so that the poor guy in the shop who's got to rack the shelves doesn't, it's not peeling it off his hands. Getting that information back to the head of the supply chain, I think is really interesting. I don't see anybody doing that. And then that's really becoming my life work to try to help that whole supply chain with customer experience.
Interesting. I'm going to rile you up a little bit.
Oh, hold on. You're not going to talk about baseball cards, are you?
No, probably not anymore. You talked about that earlier. I want to talk about the competition.
Okay.
Right. One of the things that I've discovered, in my time on my own career-wise over the last months and year, a little over a year, is that there's a misunderstanding in the CX technology buyer. They really think that, the voice of the customer, we'll call it industry, is a two-horse race between two companies, Medallia and Qualtrics. And the reality is there's such a richer consideration set out there. But the reality, they don't know. They go, is it Qualtrics? Is it Medallia? And companies, they just trade customers between the two of them. Right? But the reality is the innovation doesn't happen. Innovation happens outside of those two, in my opinion and in my experience. And the reality is, what I want to help with our listeners here, we're here to be really direct and really not play games and not pull punches. We really want to just give the straight story. I want to have people understand with the utmost clarity why CustomerGauge, what is the unique value proposition in both the very most clear way you can make it to help them understand something that Qualtrics and Medallia just will fall over their feet when they try to do that you can do. Because I believe that there's so much there, but people need to hear it. They need to understand it before they can even consider it. And I want them to hear it straight from the source.
Thanks for saying that, Mark. I mean, of course, there are other companies out there, as they say. You always have a choice. But I can tell you how we handle B2B data in CustomerGauge cannot be touched by Medallia or Qualtrics. They're just not built for it. And I mean that with the greatest respect. These are fine companies.
I agree.
Who are really good at, I think, I don't need to go into the details of what they do, but for example, the way that Qualtrics allows you to research stuff to the nth degree is phenomenal. That's not really our bag.
Right.
But that focus that Qualtrics has on the survey as the most important unit of work misses the point that if you're in B2B, you have long-term relationships with accounts. So you want to track what happens to those data points as they go on. Multiple people, as we said in there. You want to be able to put revenue on there and understand what's happening. How can you foreground what that company has been saying about you in the last several years if you're going to go and visit them for a quarterly business review? And those companies fail at that. Probably not even designed for that, but this is the area that we excel in, Mark, and I'm really proud to say that.
I mean, I could imagine that for me, I remember there was two really significant challenges that I was faced with in my past. One, in terms of my own toolboxes that I had access to at the time. I think about one of them was, three of the challenges. One of them was the idea of a respondent versus an account.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because you use any of the more, typical tools, the central unit of response is the respondent, the guy who took the survey. And there's no associative element of saying that guy or that woman is part of this organization, which in turn is part of this organization in these types of roles and capacities. So the idea of bringing people together, everybody appeared to be a unique entity unto themselves. And that's not true, but that was how I was dealt it. Number two challenge is a longitudinal over time element. And this whole idea that, as you using your example, it's a relationship.
It is. Yeah.
Relationships fluctuate, good or bad, high or low over time.
Mark, I'm going to go further. Can I go on a bit of a rant? Is that okay? Because I feel really strongly about
Adam,
this.
that's why we're here.
Okay, because you spoke about respondent. I love that. But actually, I would say not just Qualtrics and Medallia, but most other CX companies just think about responses.
Yep.
We have a different philosophy at CustomerGauge, two different philosophies, but this is the first one. The first thing is that when we work with a company, we take their book of business. So we take and we go high to low their customers, ranking them by revenue normally and putting them in the system. And only then we're putting them in our system, and then we're making sure that we go through that to get responses from it. And I got to tell you, response rate, I would say, is the best predictor of future success than anything else I know. And, I'm really keen on Net Promoter, and I got a sweet spot for CSAT and so on. But response rate, and I'm going to qualify this in a second, response rate is brilliant because it shows you how engaged you are with the customer. And often what we find when we first do this, low response rate, that's not a Net Promoter problem or a CX problem. It's a CRM problem or an engagement issue. You know this the work that you've done. But you can only do this if you control the vectors of communication with clients. And that's what we do. We have a really clean way of getting emails out or SMSs, and measuring that response rate is crucial. And again, bringing it down to each company, you can see who is responding and who isn't. And I'm going to flip it for you. The most impactful report that we ever do when we speak to a C-suite person or a senior manager in one of our new clients is we say, we're just going to stack rank the responses here. Here's your 20 largest accounts. Let's see how many responses you got from them. Oh, look, no one from 1, 2, 3. You have to get down to like the 6th or the 7th company before you get a single response. And you can see the blood drain out of the CXO's face, the CEO's face. It's like, what is happening here? He's like, I want to phone these customers now. So response is everything, Mark. And you don't get it unless you're foregrounding that in your CX system. You're missing a trick. And I think that's the most important thing. No, that is one important thing. And I'll come on to the second in a moment.
Do you see response rate really then as a kind of a leading indicator around engagement?
Oh, for sure. And by the way, let's be careful. Let's unpack response rate. 3 different ways of thinking about response rate. So you've got the contact response rate. What did you call it? Respond rate. The account response rate, because you want to make sure that, hey, I want to cover 80% of my accounts or something like that. And then the other one is, how much am I covering my revenue? And that's a key thing.
Interesting.
You'd want to be covering 90% of your revenue with outbound sends, and you'd want to get 60% of your revenue covered by responses, I believe. That is the information that we get. So just be careful about using that.
That's an interesting point. Could we unpack the idea of linking this to revenue a little bit? Because you're bringing it up here as a way to measure overall engagement, is what percent of revenue are responding to my feedback program. I think we need a way to take that a step further, and I want to hear your thoughts. A lot of voice of the customer work is getting challenged by corporate leadership teams these days for a lack of proof of ROI.
Oh yeah.
Right. Why should I keep writing the big check? Right. Why? What's in it for this company? And in the past, we've fallen back on kind of that lazy guy out of, well, our NPS is up. Right. I think we're succeeding. NPS went from X to Y.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's cheating, and really at this point not very interesting of a conversation any longer. And I'm wondering to what extent you guys are able to take that narrative and further it along and say, and we believe we have the ability to impact revenue by X amount, and be able to tell that story around. We think we could help you increase your CLV. You go from a customer giving us $113,000 to $209,000 by moving X, Y, and Z levers that we have.
I love this question, Mark. I'm going to answer this by just saying the basic thing about connecting revenue to your customer system. Well, we spoke about the white space that you've got. If you don't know which of your customers are not responding, that's no good. So you want to try and do that by revenue. But when you get your responses in, you can start looking at the themes, the drivers of satisfaction and dissatisfaction, and associate it with revenue. So you can say, okay, this bucket, we've got 100 customers complaining about logistics.
Yep.
That's not significant if we have 1,000 customers. Only 10% are doing that. But they might be the ones who are worth 80% of your revenue, to come back to your point. So then suddenly you can look at that and say, okay, well, we have a burning platform here we need to fix. And that is associated with it. So that already explodes some more value in there, because you start to understand what your drivers are worth by revenue. That's already a big step forward. But then let's think about the benefits to any CX program. And I put it to you, there's 3 areas I would put it in. The first area, which most people start with, is what you might call complaint avoidance, fixing churn. So, you look at the negative stuff, you reach out, you try to rescue those customers. That's one bucket. The next bucket, this is actually fairly overlooked, is finding promoters to upsell to. This is my favorite example. We have one of our companies, it's a big drinks manufacturer. They know that if they have a promoter, that they're twice as likely to be able to sell a second product line to that outlet. And that means if you're at the end of the quarter and you need to make your targets and you're scrambling around for people to do, you pick the promoters out and you just go and say, hey, would you like to do this? And the chances are twice as likely as you do to somebody else. Very simple metric that they've now adopted through the entire organization. And the best thing about this is that when the salespeople understood this, they suddenly go back to the CX people and say, can you survey more of our customers, please, more frequently? Because the more promoters you have, the better. So that's a real tangible thing. And Mark, there's a third bucket. And again, I would say this is overlooked. Hang on, I've got Fred's latest book here. I keep this on my desk, Winning on Purpose. So Fred talks about referral customers. And I think less than 10% of the companies we ever deal with have got a really robust referral program. But again, if you can activate your promoters to go on things like the Marc Mandel show, for example, and talk about things, it's about amplifying the voice and finding those people and doing it. So there's 3 buckets. So churn avoidance, well, that saves you on the bottom line. Upsells, huge for salespeople, and then reducing your marketing costs by bringing in new customers is the third bucket. If you can do that and find the revenue buckets in that, for you, that's gold. And that's another thing that we do for our clients. I don't know anybody else that's really doing that as a part of a mainstream software platform. So that's a huge thing that's valued by our customers.
So let's unpack those for a minute. So on the first bucket where you talk about just detractor rescues,
Yeah.
I feel very strongly that your CustomerGauge closed loop management system might be the best in the business.
That's really kind of you, Mark. Thank you for saying that. It's something we've really worked out over the years.
I think that you've not just built a sophisticated capability, you make it easy to understand who needs what help. And then now with the most recent advancements in AI.
Yeah, that's true.
You're rolling AI into that workflow in ways where a lot of that lift is being done for the rescuer to help the to be rescued in a little bit of an easier way.
Well,
you're prescribing steps, right? You're even writing emails for people. All they have to do is go, yeah, that looks good, click.
Yeah, but that's, why that you've probably heard of fear of feedback, right? You've had a career in this stuff. You come across fear of feedback before?
People are terrified to be hearing the bad stuff.
Yeah, people are paralyzed. Even if it's good, people don't know what to do. So that's what we're using AI to do, is to write a suggested email or a conversation starter. It's like it has a stratospherically impact on the closed loop rate. And Mark, can I give you another stat? We did some recent work with a client where we actually looked at the cost of doing a closed loop action and seeing what the lift is for doing a closed loop on this in terms of future revenue. What we found, in short, is that if you have an intervention, a closed loop, you're going to have an impact on future revenue, and the cost came out something like this. It's something like it's $15 to $20 to do a closed loop intervention, picking up the phone, doing an email or something like that. It's 15 minutes of somebody's time. That's what it counts. But the impact on that is something like $250.
Wow.
So it's almost like it's a 10 to 20x impact on that. But where you get the biggest impact, no surprise, but I don't know if anybody's been quantifying this, is on zeros and ones. If you go out to a zero, it's like 150x is the difference. So for the same intervention cost, hey, man, what can we do to fix it? There's something, and this is what I really love. If we've got time to talk about the human impact of relationships, this is what I really live for, is that there's something about customers, especially in B2B, where they give you a chance. We all know you can screw up. Stuff happens. So part of it is venting about it to somebody and just absorbing that oh man, we really screwed up. To saying, okay, how can we make this right for you? And then if you show up and you fix it, then you've almost got a customer for life. The stats prove this. So if anybody takes anything away from this, is that closing the loop and closing it fast within 48 hours has a disproportionate effect. Something like 10 to 20x revenue on that.
I remember a story. This goes back a lifetime ago. I was with a consulting outfit at the time. And one of our clients was a large credit card issuer. And they were rolling out a high net worth credit card product. And it was interesting because they brought us in to understand kind of the definite customer behaviors of complainers and what was going on in that customer base. And we discovered when we did some very preliminary research back then, this is probably 10, 11, 12 years ago, where we said to the client, we've uncovered the fact that your most loyal customer, bar none, is the customer who had a problem that was easily fixed versus, the guy who never even had a problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so we sort of joked and we said, if it were us, we'd probably try to create problems that we know we can fix.
Yeah, there's a concept. Put some friction in the process so you can make it, but there's jury's out on it, how easy it is to do that. But normally I would say there's enough friction in your process. You don't need to do it deliberately, but it's about maybe helping, really taking the attention to do that.
But that was creating literally lifelong loyalty in that example.
Mark, can I go further about this? Because I mean, you compared us to Qualtrics and Medallia. I think there's something that we really hold dear as a company. You know, our mission, as we see this, is to we even say we're there to help turn customer feedback into revenue growth, to turn research into action. And we are so tight on this now that we won't accept customers who are not prepared to close the loop. I just want to set that sink in, is that we challenge our customers when we do it. And it's not an easy way of doing business, but Camilla and I feel really strongly about this, that if it's just not a good fit for us morally, if you're taking customer feedback and you're not prepared to even say, hey, here's what we learned, I think that's almost a criminal activity in today's age. So that is something. So I wouldn't say we turn customers away, because they're somewhat self-selecting, but it's a real challenge we do up front. If you don't want to close the loop with your customers, doesn't sound like you want to get better, that's not a good fit for our software and solution.
It's just measurement then.
You might be better off with one of the other companies you mentioned, for example.
I mean, all kidding aside, there, again, is historical example. I'm not going to name this name, but there was a large furniture manufacturer in the United States who brought my old team and me in a while back, who had been previously engaging a large custom market research company to do customer feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then they moved from a full service provider to a technology partnership. And I remember when I first met the company before they engaged my team, I said, how do you do it today? And they told me, and I said, can you show me an example of this feedback that you collected over the years? He says, sure, come with me. And Adam, no lie, the guy walked me into a room in the office building.
Yeah.
It was floor to ceiling bookshelves. And the bookshelves were full of these big, fat, loose leaf binders. And each binder had writing up the back of the book, like, 2006, January to June. And each book was full of maybe 750 PowerPoint slides. and
I guess where this is going.
The books were dusty, right? They had never been opened or touched. And I said, what's this? And he goes, this is our feedback. Yeah. And I said, how do people action this? And the guys looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, don't you take follow-up steps based on what people are telling you?
Yeah.
He says, generally, we put the books here such that if anybody in the company wants to see what people are saying, they could come like the library and borrow a book. And they could look. And I said, how many people do that? He says, well, none.
Yeah.
And I said, what did you pay for those books? He goes, each book was about $500,000. And you could picture a room full of them.
Oh man, that's like feedback furniture. It's only good. It's only used to put under a monitor so you can lift
Stop it from being wobbly.
Yeah. I mean that's but that's he's not alone. That happens. You must have seen that. I mean, thanks for sharing that story. I've also got dozens of war stories like that, and it's the kind of like it's the once a year survey where we understand what the customers are saying. But Mark, I'm going to get angry in a minute. Feedback is not just for Christmas, as they say about when you give a pet to a kid. You know that stuff? It should be done all through the year.
Yep.
I feel really passionate about this. And you have to exercise your muscles. So, I try not to go to the gym just once a year. I try to go a few times a week. And the only reason is that, you need to keep that muscle going. Otherwise, it's hell on earth to do it. Every company needs to do that. And one other thing, Mark, man, I'm sorry, it's just turned into a ranting session. But you know what? Feedback is like fish. It only stays fresh for 2 to 3 days max.
Yep. I
think you should think about it as sushi, to be honest, really good tuna, because that customer gold that you get back, you need to jump on it straight away. And if after 3 days, you might as well forget it because the customer certainly has. But if you can get on it, and then it becomes a delicious two-way conversation that you can have with one of your customers. Maybe I'm stretching the metaphor a bit, but
No,
I feel really strongly about that.
Let's take that metaphor just a step further. I believe that the act of asking customers for feedback and to do it well needs to be an intentional part of the customer's journey with the company.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not this weird sort of after the fact, throw away, who cares, it's only a survey mindset. I think we need to deliver a ideal experience in the feedback process if we want our responding customers to take that request seriously.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, if we treat it like it doesn't matter to us, it's not going to matter to them.
But there's a technical barrier to do this, because most, again, you spoke about some of the leaders out there. These are often administered by the high priests of insight, ivory tower, by the way that mainframe computers used to be. And we don't believe in that at all. We believe that feedback should be in the hands, the people who are in the customer front line. You've got to get it to them. Yep. That is what we do. We've got some of our customers with thousands of licenses of CustomerGauge. They're getting the feedback immediately. They have all the tools to look back through the history and act on it with AI, as you can see that. And that is what makes the difference. You have to somewhat trust your frontline people to have those grown-up B2B conversations with customers and be prepared to be vulnerable about poor performance. Yeah.
Yep.
We screwed up on that. That vulnerability builds trust and transparency. And Marc, you must know this from your career. Trust and transparency in a business relationship normally leads to better business outcomes, right? That's at the heart of everything that everyone at CustomerGauge stands for. Is trying to really build those personal relationships with feedback, and that's what we really care passionately about.
But when you talk about fear of feedback before, and even here, one of the things I relate to is companies, B2B companies, where the conversation goes something like this internally. Oh no, this is not a great time to be getting feedback from such and such a customer.
Yes.
We had a really bad delivery with them. We're not going to talk to them right now. We're going to hold off. Or they're a little late on paying our bill. Let's hold off. Or, we haven't upgraded the software lately. Let's hold off.
Yeah.
Right. And that's terrible. Or worse yet, again, not naming names. There's a particular industry where I did a lot of feedback work where the sales or account team can say, after they've gotten the feedback, they could look it over and they go, I don't like what they had to say, so let's take this out of the equation. Right? They can edit the feedback, or they censor it and they go, that one, we're not counting that one.
We don't have that feature in CustomerGauge, Marc. We took that out. So
good for you.
It's shocking though, isn't it? I mean, they're only cheating themselves.
Yep.
That's what my mother used to say. You're only cheating yourself, Adam. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's just, why would any company do that? It's like,
it's terrible. It's terrible. Talk about companies I know we're winding down our time here. You mentioned a couple of companies before that you and the team work with and for right now. But I want to ask you a bigger picture question. Yeah. Is there a particular brand of a company out there that comes to your mind that you just think is really exceptional? That if you could say, boy, it would be a dream job to do a project for such and such a company. Is there a company that you just think they're just crushing it out there? And if you could help them crush it even a little better, a little further, who's that company that just delights you?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. I think there are two types of companies I love to work for. One is the industrial companies who are making quality products that are kind of maybe a bit boring. In fact, you nailed this with your corrugated iron. Hold on, I've got one I can show you. I went to see. This is a packaging company in the Netherlands who makes these machines that put stuff in these bags.
Yeah,
which is kind of a high-tech stuff. It's got aluminium in it. But amazing quality. They really care about the quality of the stuff that they do, and they want to have the same quality of control in their customer domain. So I love companies like that. So the people who are instrumenting their customer base, maybe at a small scale, but it's really important to them. I love that. And if there were companies I would love to work for, they're the sort of precision engineering companies. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. It'll come to me in a second. But the other companies I really love, and we do this at scale, are what they call the CPG companies. So the Cokes, the Heinekens. We've got many of the brands that are out there. We've done projects for Mars, for example, and Diageo. And so I would say I would love to help instrument that whole supply chain. So if Pepsi were to come to us, or Nestle tomorrow, and say, hey, Adam, we'd love to work for you, that would be a great fit, because I know that we can help these companies really go all the way to improving their customer experience. And Mark, these companies make up such a big part of our GDP. So many people work in that supply chain that as they start to lift this, I believe it can actually make a material difference to mankind, if I can use that word, you know?
Sure.
Something like 5% of the world's population work in the CPG supply chain, whether it's from picking hops for beer, farming stuff, making cardboard rolls, filling up bags like this in the supply chain, to stacking shelves, to serving beer, and anything that can be done to lift the customer experience along that supply chain. I think that would be a good impact that we could do. I hope that answered your question.
I think it did. Thank you for sharing that. You know, I would love to sit here and talk with you for another 18 hours before we have to go on to our actual jobs, but we're not going to get that opportunity right now. I'm looking at the clock, realizing we're right up against the top of the hour, and I want to be mindful of people who are kind enough to be listening in to give them back their time. So Adam, just help me understand this. If people listening in now at the live session or in any of the follow-ups on this want to reach out to you, how do they find you? Is it just LinkedIn? Is there a better way to get a hold of you? What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Well, CustomerGauge.com, it'll get to me eventually, but I would say LinkedIn is really good. And Mark, if I could just give a plug to my new digital twin. So if you like the sort of stuff I talk about, a lot of it is available as a kind of digital twin, which is on the Delphi AI platform, by the way. You can see that link in my LinkedIn thing, or Mark, you can post it. So you can ask my digital twin questions and probably get a better answer than you would from me.
That's very cool. So CustomerGauge.com?
Yeah, CustomerGauge.com is where you need to go. Don't forget, it's the only company with customer in the title.
I think that's a really important thing. You know, say this on the way out. There's so many companies out there that claim to have an expertise in thinking about customers differently, but most struggle to actually deliver. And the reality is, I've seen you and your team over the years really just be so differentiated and so thoughtful in what you do and how you do it. You know, there's a rhyme to every bit of reason in what you're doing. And it makes perfect sense. And I hope my listeners, and more to the point, friends out there, take the time to go look at CustomerGauge, visit the website, see if you could ask nicely. Maybe CustomerGauge will let you see part of their content academy. They have the CX Academy on the internet of great materials out there. I think there's some really amazing learning opportunities that you put out there for people. And if you ever want to talk to people who just get it, who just know the B2B realm like nobody else, my friend, CustomerGauge is the place. Let me make that clear. CustomerGauge is the place to go. Adam, you're a gift. You're just an absolute, amazing leader, amazing, thoughtful guy, and just, a man that I truly admire and respect and truly like. But the admiration comes from your courage of going out there and saying, there were easier ways and I chose this.
Yeah, I think it's paid off because we are the expert in the field, but it also makes us feel like a leader. So thanks for that.
It was the path less chosen. and I'm grateful for the opportunity to let my friends hear your story today. So thank you for hanging out here, man. It was good to spend the hour together. And my friends, check out CustomerGauge. It's good stuff. If you want introductions directly to Adam or his team, I could make those introductions for you guys as well. And let's just keep the conversation going offline now that we're winding down here. My friends, we're gonna bring this show to a close. We have some new content coming up over the next couple of weeks. Some announcements about that next week. And just keep doing, guys, what you're doing. And Adam, thank you for doing what you do and for sharing the hour with my friends and me. It's good to hang out here with you.
No problem, Mark. Thanks for the tough questions. That was, you said you would ask them, but that's it.
I hope they weren't too much brain twisters for you.
No, hey, and best of luck with auction wire. It sounds like an interesting thing with your cards.
Thank you, guys.
All
thanks.
right.
We'll see you guys real soon now.
Take care. Bye.